My name is Harper Bailey, and I'm 28 years old. When I was 13, my parents abandoned me without warning, leaving only a hastily written note. That's when my wealthy Uncle Thomas took me in, changing my life forever in ways I never imagined. 15 years later, we all gathered in a lawyer's office where my parents expected to claim millions from his estate. But then the lawyer read one line from the will that made everyone's head snap toward my parents. Before I tell you how their faces turned pale when they heard those words, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like button if you've ever had someone unexpectedly change your life. Before everything fell apart, we lived a seemingly normal middle-class life in Portland. Our two-story house on Maple Street wasn't fancy, but it was home. Dad worked as a sales manager at a car dealership while Mom handled accounts for a local business. I had no idea that beneath our ordinary suburban existence, a storm was brewing. My father, Richard Bailey, had always been charismatic and outgoing qualities that made him successful in sales. What I didn't know was that he had a gambling problem that had steadily worsened over the years. Every weekend, he'd say he was meeting the guys for poker, but he was actually hitting the casinos across the state line, betting increasingly large sums to chase his losses. My mother, Diane, knew about it but kept it from me. I'd sometimes catch them arguing in hushed tones late at night. "This has to stop, Richard," she'd hiss. "We're drowning here." He'd promise it was the last time, but it never was. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs. Bill collectors calling constantly. The electricity getting shut off once for 3 days, which they explained away as an error with the power company. Mom's growing depression, her eyes perpetually red-rimmed. Dad's increased drinking and his explosive anger over minor things like a dish left in the sink. Then came that Thursday in October, a day that still feels crystal clear in my memory despite 15 years having passed. I'd had a normal day at Westbrook Middle School math test, lunch with friends, gym class where I'd scored the winning basketball point. I walked home feeling pretty good, actually. When I reached our street, I noticed both cars were gone, which was odd since Mom was usually home when I got back from school. No big deal, I thought. Maybe she went grocery shopping. I used my key to unlock the door and called out, "I'm home." Only silence greeted me. Something felt different, emptier somehow. That's when I saw the note on the kitchen counter, held down by my mom's favorite ceramic mug. Just a few lines in her handwriting. "Harper, your father and I need a fresh start. We're moving to Arizona to sort things out. We can't take you with us right now. Maybe someday when we're back on our feet. There's $50 in the envelope. Call Mrs. Patterson next door, she'll know what to do. I'm sorry, Mom." I read it 7 times, convinced it was some kind of joke. $50 and a note? I ran upstairs to their bedroom and yanked open drawers. Empty. Closet? Empty except for some old clothes they didn't want. Bathroom? Their toothbrushes and toiletries gone. I don't remember much about the next few hours. I think I sat on their bed, clutching the note, unable to process what was happening. Eventually I walked to Mrs. Patterson's house in a daze. Her face crumpled with pity when I showed her the note. "Oh, Harper, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and cookies. I didn't cry. I was too shocked. Mrs. Patterson called the police, who confirmed that my parents had the legal right to leave, but not to abandon their child. Social services came. A woman named Miss Winters with kind eyes and a tired face asked me questions I barely processed while Mrs. Patterson made us tea. "Do you have any relatives who could take you in?" Miss Winters asked. I shrugged. "My grandparents are dead. Mom has a sister somewhere in Florida, I think, but they don't talk." "What about your father's side?" "He has a brother, my Uncle Thomas. But I've only met him twice at family funerals. They're not close." Miss Winters nodded, writing something down. "We'll try to contact him, but in the meantime, we need to find you temporary placement." The Johnsons were nice enough, a foster family who took emergency cases. They had 3 other kids staying with them, all younger than me. Mrs. Johnson gave me a small room with a twin bed and a dresser, told me to call her Linda, and promised they'd sort this all out. I spent 5 nights there, barely sleeping, checking my phone constantly for messages from my parents that never came. The one text I sent, "Why?" went unanswered. I tried calling, but their numbers had been disconnected. On the sixth day, Miss Winters returned. "Harper, we've located your uncle, Thomas Bailey. He lives in Seattle." I nodded, not really caring. What was one more stranger at this point? "The thing is," she continued, looking surprised, "he wants to take custody of you. He's flying down today." That afternoon, as I sat in Miss Winters' office waiting, I heard the receptionist's voice rise with an unusual note of deference. "Of course, Mr. Bailey. Right this way." The man who walked in looked nothing like my father. Where Dad was average height with a softening middle from too much beer, this man was tall and fit, his posture military straight. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage. His hair was salt and pepper, neatly trimmed, his face angular with the same Bailey blue eyes I saw in the mirror. Miss Winters stood to greet him. "Mr. Bailey, thank you for coming so quickly." He nodded curtly, then turned to me, his expression softening. "Harper, I'm your Uncle Thomas. I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances." I just stared. This man was practically a stranger. Why would he want me? As if reading my mind, he sat down across from me. "Your father and I haven't been close for many years, but that doesn't change the fact that you're my nephew. Family is family." Miss Winters seemed equally puzzled. "Mr. Bailey, while we appreciate your willingness to take Harper, there is a process. Home studies, background checks." Uncle Thomas cut her off politely but firmly. "I've already spoken with my lawyers. They're expediting everything. I can provide Harper with stability, education, and anything else he needs. I believe that's preferable to temporary foster care, wouldn't you agree?" The next few hours were a blur of paperwork and quiet conversations just out of my earshot. By evening, I was somehow riding in a sleek black car with a man I barely knew, headed to the airport where his private jet waited to take us to Seattle and my new life. The private jet should have been my first clue about just how wealthy Uncle Thomas was, but my mind was still processing the shock of abandonment. As we flew north to Seattle, Uncle Thomas mostly left me to my thoughts, occasionally asking if I wanted anything to drink or if the cabin temperature was comfortable. "Your father never mentioned what I do, did he?" he asked after a stretch of silence. I shook my head. "Dad didn't talk about you much." A slight smile crossed his face. "I'm not surprised. I founded Bailey Technologies 30 years ago. We specialize in sustainable energy solutions and advanced engineering systems." The name sounded vaguely familiar. I might have seen it on buildings or in the news, but I hadn't connected it to my own family. When we landed, another sleek car waited on the tarmac. As we drove from the airport, the Seattle skyline gave way to increasingly exclusive neighborhoods until we turned through an ornate iron gate that opened automatically at our approach. The driveway wound through immaculately landscaped grounds before revealing a house that looked more like a modern castle. "This is Evergreen Estate," Uncle Thomas said. "It's been my home for 20 years, and now it's yours too." The mansion was all glass, stone, and clean architectural lines, perched on a bluff overlooking Puget Sound. The entrance featured 20-foot ceilings and a chandelier that looked like floating glass bubbles. The floors were polished concrete and exotic wood. Everything spoke of wealth that I couldn't even comprehend. An older woman with warm brown eyes and silver-streaked dark hair greeted us at the door. "Harper, this is Mrs. Rodriguez. She's been running this house for 15 years and knows it better than I do." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled at me. "Welcome, young Mr. Bailey. I've prepared your room. You must be exhausted." A tall, lean man in his 30s appeared from another room, holding a tablet. "The security upgrades are scheduled for tomorrow, and I've arranged for the school paperwork to be processed," he said to my uncle before turning to me with a nod. "Hello, Harper. I'm Jackson, your uncle's personal assistant." Uncle Thomas nodded. "Thank you, Jackson. Harper and I will have dinner in an hour. Please make sure everything's ready." As Mrs. Rodriguez led me through the house, I felt like I'd stepped into another dimension. The place had an indoor swimming pool, a gym, a theater room, and a library with more books than my school. We took an elevator, an actual elevator inside a house, to the second floor. "This will be your suite," Mrs. Rodriguez said, opening double doors to reveal not just a bedroom, but an entire apartment-like space. The main room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, a king-sized bed, a seating area with a couch and chairs, and a desk with a brand new laptop and gaming system. A door led to a bathroom bigger than my old bedroom, with a shower that had multiple jets and a soaking tub. "Mr. Thomas had this prepared when he learned you were coming," she explained. "The closet has been stocked with clothes that should fit, but we'll arrange for more tomorrow." When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. Just days ago, I'd been a normal kid in a modest house with parents who, despite their problems, I thought loved me. Now I was in a mansion with an uncle I barely knew, surrounded by luxury but feeling utterly alone. I opened the closet to find it filled with clothes in my size. Jeans, shirts, sweaters, even pajamas, all with designer labels I recognized from the rich kids at my old school. A row of sneakers and shoes lined the bottom, including a pair of the expensive basketball shoes I'd coveted but my parents had said were too extravagant. Dinner was served in a formal dining room at a table that could seat 20, though only 2 places were set at one end. Uncle Thomas appeared as I entered, having changed from his suit to more casual but still expensive-looking clothes. "I hope the room is suitable," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "If you need anything changed, just tell Mrs. Rodriguez." A chef I hadn't even realized existed brought out several courses of food I barely recognized. Uncle Thomas attempted conversation, asking about school subjects I enjoyed and activities I participated in. His manner was awkward but sincere, like someone who wasn't used to talking with teenagers but was genuinely trying. "I've enrolled you in Westlake Academy," he said between courses. "It's the best private school in Seattle. You'll start on Monday, which gives you a few days to settle in." I pushed food around my plate. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Uncle Thomas set down his fork. "You're right. I don't know you well, and you don't know me. But we're family, and I have the means to give you opportunities. That's reason enough." That night, alone in the palatial bedroom, everything finally hit me. I cried for hours, muffling my sobs in a pillow that probably cost more than all the bedding in my old house combined. I cried for my parents' betrayal, for the life I'd lost, for the uncertainty of my future with this wealthy stranger who called himself family but felt nothing like it. A soft knock at the door startled me. I quickly wiped my eyes, but when Uncle Thomas entered, he could clearly see I'd been crying. He hesitated, then sat at the edge of the bed. "I know this is overwhelming, and I know I can't replace your parents." "They left me," I said, voice cracking. "They just left. With a note." "Who does that?" Uncle Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Your father and I grew up with parents who weren't kind people. Our father was harsh, sometimes cruel. Our mother was indifferent at best. I left home at 16, worked my way through college, built my company from nothing. Your father, he made different choices. He looked out the window at the moonlight on the water. I always thought Richard was stronger than me, more resilient. He had a charm I never possessed, made friends easily. But perhaps I was wrong about which of us was stronger." He turned back to me. "I can't explain why they left you, Harper. But I can promise you this. I will never abandon you. This home is yours for as long as you want it. Your education, your future, whatever you need, it's yours. Not out of pity, but because you deserve it." Something in his voice, its quiet certainty, perhaps made me believe him, at least a little. It wasn't enough to heal the wound my parents had left, but it was something to hold on to in the darkness. Westlake Academy looked more like a small college campus than a high school. Gothic-inspired buildings surrounded a perfectly manicured quad, where students in navy blue blazers and khaki pants gathered in clusters. Every car in the student parking lot was expensive. Mercedes, BMWs, even a few Porsches driven by seniors. Jackson dropped me off that first Monday morning in Uncle Thomas's Bentley, which immediately drew attention, but not in the way I expected. "That's Thomas Bailey's car," I heard someone whisper as I walked toward the administration building. "Is that his son?" The headmaster, Dr. Harrison, welcomed me personally, something I later learned was unusual. "Mr. Bailey, welcome to Westlake. Your uncle is one of our most generous benefactors. We're delighted to have you join us." That was my introduction to Uncle Thomas's true status in Seattle, not just wealthy, but influential. The science building was named after him. The advanced engineering program existed because of his donations. Teachers spoke his name with reverence. It should have made things easier. Instead, it made them harder. "So you're the charity case," said a tall boy who intercepted me in the hallway after third period. His blazer looked custom-tailored. His watch gleamed with real gold. "I'm Trevor Blackwood. My father runs Blackwood Investments." He looked me up and down. "Is it true your parents dumped you on Thomas Bailey's doorstep because they couldn't afford to feed you anymore?" The rumor stung worse because it wasn't far from the truth. "My uncle is my guardian now," I said, trying to move past him. Trevor blocked my way. "Must be nice to suddenly become an heir to the Bailey fortune. I bet you think you've hit the jackpot." "Leave him alone, Trevor," came a girl's voice from behind us. "Don't you have some puppies to kick or something?" The girl had curly hair pulled back in a messy bun, paint stains on her fingers, and an air of complete indifference to Trevor's obvious wealth and status. "Mind your business, scholarship girl," Trevor sneered. "Make me trust fund, baby," she shot back without missing a beat. Trevor rolled his eyes and walked away, but not before saying, "This isn't over, Bailey." The girl turned to me. "Zoe Washington. Scholarship student, obviously, and proud of it. You must be Harper Bailey, nephew of the great Thomas Bailey, whose name is on half the buildings around here." "That's me," I said, relieved to have made what seemed like a potential ally. "Thanks for the rescue." Trevor's all bark, no bite. His father wants to partner with your uncle on some big development project, so he's extra jealous of anyone with the Bailey name right now. Zoe became my first friend at Westlake, showing me which teachers were strict, which cafeteria foods to avoid, and which shortcuts to take between buildings. As an art scholarship student among the ultra-wealthy, she understood what it was like to be an outsider. The academic standards at Westlake were far more rigorous than my old school. I struggled to catch up, especially in advanced math and science. Uncle Thomas noticed my late-night studying but didn't intervene directly. Instead, he hired tutors who came to the house 3 times a week. "Education is the one thing no one can ever take from you," he told me. "It's worth the hard work." Our relationship remained somewhat formal those first few months. He was often busy with work, traveling frequently for business. When he was home, we had dinner together, making awkward small talk about school and current events. He wasn't warm like my father had been in his better moments, but he was consistent and dependable qualities I was beginning to value more than charm. One Saturday, about 3 months after I moved in, I was wandering the grounds when I noticed a building set apart from the main house. Curious, I peered through the windows and saw what looked like an elaborate workshop filled with machinery, computers, and half-finished projects. As I was about to turn away, the door opened, and Uncle Thomas emerged in jeans and a worn t-shirt, an outfit so unlike his usual suits that I barely recognized him. "Harper," he said, surprised. "I was just about to break for lunch." "What is this place?" I asked. A smile transformed his usually serious face. "My workshop, where I go to remember why I started my company in the first place." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to see?" Inside was an inventor's paradise. 3D printers, lathes, welding equipment, computer stations, and workbenches covered with tools and parts. In the center sat what looked like a partially assembled robot. "You build robots?" I asked, amazed. "Among other things. This one's for a competition a friend challenged me to." He pointed to various projects around the room. "That's a more efficient solar panel design I'm tinkering with. Over there is a water filtration system for developing countries." I walked around fascinated. "You do this for fun?" "I do this to solve problems," he said. "Money, companies, business meetings, that's all just means to an end. This," he gestured around the workshop, "this is where the real work happens, where ideas become solutions." For the first time, I saw genuine passion in my uncle. Not the reserved, controlled businessman, but an engineer who loved creating things. It was the first time I felt a real connection with him, the first hint that there might be something of myself in him too. "Could you show me how some of this works?" I asked. Uncle Thomas's face lit up. "I'd like nothing better." That afternoon marked a turning point in our relationship. Over sandwiches and sodas, surrounded by half-finished inventions, we found common ground. I discovered I had an aptitude for engineering that matched my uncle's. He showed me how to use basic tools, explaining concepts with a clarity my school teachers lacked. As Christmas approached, I grew increasingly anxious. It would be my first holiday without my parents. Despite our strained relationship over the past few years, we'd always had traditions: picking out a tree together, watching classic movies on Christmas Eve, opening one present at midnight. Uncle Thomas seemed to sense my melancholy. "I don't usually decorate much for the holidays," he admitted one evening. "Perhaps this year should be different." The next day, I came home from school to find the mansion transformed. Professional decorators had installed a 20-foot tree in the great room, hung garlands along the staircases, and placed tasteful arrangements throughout the house. It was beautiful but felt staged, like a department store display. That evening, Uncle Thomas presented me with a box. Inside was an ornament-making kit. "Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned your mother collected ornaments," he said awkwardly. "I thought perhaps you might want to make some for our tree." The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful that I had to blink back tears. "Thank you," I managed. "Maybe you could help?" That night, we sat at the kitchen table making ridiculously amateur ornaments that looked completely out of place on the professionally decorated tree, and somehow that made the tree perfect. 2 days before Christmas, a letter arrived with an Arizona postmark. My heart raced as Mrs. Rodriguez handed it to me, but Uncle Thomas intercepted it first. "May I?" he asked, his expression concerned. I nodded, suddenly afraid of what it might contain. Uncle Thomas opened the letter, his face growing harder as he read. Finally, he handed it to me. The note was brief, unsigned, and in my mother's handwriting. "Harper, hope you're doing okay with Thomas. Things are tough here. Could use some help getting back on our feet. Maybe Thomas could spare some cash for your parents? We miss you. Arizona is nice but expensive. No Merry Christmas. No, I'm sorry we abandoned you. Just a thinly veiled request for money." I crumpled the note, anger replacing the hope I'd briefly felt. "They just want money." Uncle Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder. "They won't get it, not from me, and not from you. Your inheritance is in a trust they can't touch. You'll never have to give them anything you don't want to." "Inheritance?" I asked, surprised. "We'll discuss that when you're older," he said firmly. "For now, know that your future is secure regardless of what they do or say." That Christmas, we established our own traditions. Mrs. Rodriguez taught me to make her family's traditional tamales. Uncle Thomas and I spent hours in the workshop building a model rocket. We watched sci-fi movies instead of Christmas classics. It wasn't the family I'd been born into, but slowly, it was becoming the family I needed. 3 years passed, and I turned 16 in a life that sometimes still felt like someone else's. The gangly, shell-shocked 13-year-old had grown into a confident teenager who ranked in the top 5 of his class at one of the most competitive schools in the country. My voice had deepened. I'd shot up to 6'1", and I'd developed the same broad-shouldered build as Uncle Thomas. The mansion no longer intimidated me. I moved through its spaces with the ease of someone who belonged there, though I never took its luxury for granted. Mrs. Rodriguez no longer called me young Mr. Bailey, but simply Harper, with a warmth that made me feel like family. The biggest change, though, was my relationship with Uncle Thomas. What had begun as awkward obligation had evolved into genuine affection and mutual respect. We spent weekends in the workshop, which he now called our workshop, collaborating on increasingly complex projects. He taught me not just engineering principles, but business ones too. "The most brilliant invention in the world is worthless if you can't bring it to the people who need it," he would say. That's where business comes in. It's the bridge between innovation and impact. While he still traveled for work, he made a point of being home for important school events. He sat front row at science competitions, applauded at basketball games, though I wasn't nearly as good as the dedicated athletes, and met with my teachers regularly. At school I had found my place as well. Trevor Blackwood still sneered when we passed in hallways, but his attempts to bully me had lost their impact. I had a small but solid group of friends now. Zoe remained closest, along with Andrew Kim, a computer programming genius, and Marcus Jones, who shared my interest in renewable energy. My parents' communications had fallen into a predictable pattern. Every few months, a letter or email would arrive, always with the same subtext: They needed money. Sometimes they claimed medical emergencies, other times car repairs or job losses. Once they even suggested they were ready to be a family again if Uncle Thomas would help them get established in Seattle. Uncle Thomas handled these communications, shielding me from the worst of their manipulation. "You don't need to carry this burden," he insisted when I asked about a particularly demanding email my father had sent. "Focus on your education and your future." But their periodic intrusions had left a scar that never fully healed. I developed a reflexive distrust of people's motives, always wondering if someone was being nice to me because of my uncle's wealth or my own merit. Zoe called it my emotional armor, and was one of the few people who could see past it. One evening during spring break of my junior year, Uncle Thomas and I were working late in the workshop. He'd been teaching me about sustainable building materials, and we'd lost track of time experimenting with different compounds. "We should call it a night," he said, checking his watch. "Mrs. Rodriguez will think we've starved to death." As we cleaned up, I noticed him wince slightly as he reached for a tool on a high shelf. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Just getting old," he said with a forced smile. "Not as spry as I once was." 2 days later, I overheard him on the phone in his study, the door not quite closed. "Yes, Dr. Ramirez, I understand the prognosis. 6 months to a year without treatment, possibly 2 years with aggressive intervention. But the quality of life factors are significant." My blood ran cold. I pushed the door open without knocking. "You're sick." Uncle Thomas looked up, surprised, then resigned. He hung up the phone. "I was going to tell you after your exams." "Tell me what?" My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. "I have pancreatic cancer," he said simply. "Stage 4. It spread to my liver." The world tilted. This man who had become my rock, my constant in a life filled with abandonment and change, was now telling me he was dying. "There are treatments," I said desperately. "We have money. We can go anywhere. Get the best doctors. Harper." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've consulted with the best oncologists in the country. The cancer is aggressive and was caught too late for surgery. There are treatment options that might extend my life somewhat, but they won't cure me." I sank into the chair across from his desk, trying to process this information. "How long have you known?" "About a month. And you didn't tell me?" I wanted to be sure of the diagnosis and understand the options first. He came around the desk and sat in the chair beside me. "Harper, look at me." I raised my eyes to meet his. "This changes nothing about your future. Everything is arranged. Your education, your inheritance. This house, it will all be yours. Jackson and Mrs. Rodriguez will stay on if you want them to. My legal team will ensure no one, including your parents, can interfere." "I don't care about any of that," I said, my voice breaking. "I care about you." Something in his expression shifted a softening I rarely saw. "Then you understand how I felt when you came into my life. Why securing your future became my priority." In the following months, Uncle Thomas began treatment not with the goal of cure, but of extending his time with minimal suffering. He worked from home more often, conserving his energy for the things that mattered most. Despite his illness, he insisted I continue my normal activities. "Your life shouldn't stop because mine is winding down," he said. But it was impossible to carry on, as if nothing had changed. I threw myself into research about pancreatic cancer, spending hours in the school library and online, looking for experimental treatments or clinical trials. Uncle Thomas humored me but remained pragmatic. "The greatest gift you can give me," he said, "is to live your life fully and with purpose. To use the opportunities I've tried to provide and make something meaningful of them." He began sharing more about his business and philanthropy, showing me projects Bailey Technologies had implemented around the world's solar farms, bringing electricity to remote villages, water purification systems in drought-stricken regions, affordable housing built with sustainable materials. "This is my legacy," he told me. "Not the money or the mansion, but the problems we've solved, the lives we've improved." I listened and learned, but a part of me remained angry. Angry at the unfairness of losing someone else, angry at my parents for wasting years I could have had with him, angry at a world where good people suffered, while selfish ones thrived. One evening, when that anger spilled over into bitter comments about my parents, Uncle Thomas set down his book and looked at me intently. "Harper, I need to tell you something important about anger and forgiveness," he said. "I spent many years angry at my brother, your father, for choices he made that I couldn't understand. That anger didn't hurt him. It only poisoned my own life." "That's different," I insisted. "He didn't abandon you when you were a kid." "No, but I abandoned him in other ways. I was so focused on escaping our childhood, on building my company, that I left him behind. I told myself he was stronger, more capable socially. The truth is, I didn't want the responsibility of helping him overcome the damage our parents had done to us both. It was the most he'd ever revealed about their shared past, and it silenced my protest. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did," he continued. "It's about refusing to let their actions determine your future happiness. Your parents made terrible choices that hurt you deeply. You have every right to your anger. But don't let that anger become the foundation of who you are. Build on something stronger." Those words stayed with me, challenging my growing resentment and offering a different path forward, one I wasn't sure I was ready to take, but one I couldn't ignore. Harper James Bailey. As the headmaster called my name, I walked across the stage to receive my high school diploma. From the audience came enthusiastic applause led by Uncle Thomas, thin and pale but sitting proudly in the front row. Despite his deteriorating health, he had insisted on attending my graduation. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside him, dabbing tears with a handkerchief, while Jackson stood vigilantly nearby. As valedictorian, I had already delivered my speech earlier in the ceremony. Looking out at the sea of faces, classmates in their caps and gowns, proud parents with cameras and flowers, I had spoken about resilience and finding family in unexpected places. 5 years ago, I thought I knew what family meant, I'd said. I was wrong. Family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's defined by who shows up when everyone else walks away. Who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself? Who teaches you not just how to succeed, but how to become the person you're meant to be? From the stage, I'd locked eyes with Uncle Thomas, whose usually stoic expression had softened with emotion. To the person who taught me that true strength isn't about never falling, but about how you rise after each fall, thank you for showing me what it means to live with purpose and integrity. Everything I achieve will carry your influence. Now, diploma in hand, I descended from the stage and returned to my seat for the remainder of the ceremony. Later, at the small celebration Uncle Thomas had arranged at the mansion, I found him sitting alone on the terrace overlooking the Sound. "You should be enjoying your party," he said, gesturing toward the gathering inside where my friends and teachers mingled with Uncle Thomas's business associates. "I wanted to check on you," I replied, taking the seat beside him. "How are you feeling?" "Proud," he said simply. "Prouder than I've ever been about anything I've accomplished myself." The summer stretched before us with bittersweet awareness. I had been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship following in Uncle Thomas's footsteps, but I had deferred for a year with the university's understanding of the circumstances. Uncle Thomas had initially objected. "Your education shouldn't wait," he'd insisted. "Some lessons can't be learned in a classroom," I'd countered. "I want to be here. Please let me." He'd relented, and now we had precious months to spend together before his health declined further. We made the most of that summer. When he had energy, we worked in the workshop on projects he called his last hurrahs, innovations he wanted to complete before he couldn't anymore. He introduced me to his closest business associates, ensuring they would mentor me in the future. We took short trips to places he loved: the Grand Canyon at sunrise, the redwood forests of Northern California, the quiet lakes of Montana where he'd fished as a young man finding his way. Between these good days came increasingly difficult ones as the cancer progressed despite treatment. Hospice nurses began visiting the house regularly. A hospital bed was installed in Uncle Thomas's room for his comfort. Mrs. Rodriguez prepared his favorite foods in increasingly smaller portions as his appetite waned. During these harder times, we had conversations that would shape the rest of my life. Uncle Thomas spoke openly about death, about his beliefs, about his hopes for my future. "Don't waste time on regret," he told me during one late-night conversation when pain kept him awake. I spent too many years regretting the relationship I didn't have with my brother. It changed nothing. I'm still angry at them, I admitted. I don't know if I can ever forgive them. Forgiveness isn't something you do once, and it's finished, he said. It's a choice you make again and again, and it's not for them, it's for you. As summer turned to fall, Uncle Thomas asked me to make a promise. Whatever you do with your life, Harper, promise me you'll choose it for yourself, not out of obligation to me or rebellion against your parents. Follow your own path. I promise, I said, meaning it, and promise me something else, he added, his voice weaker, but his eyes still bright with intelligence. Promise you won't seek revenge against your parents, no matter what they do or say in the future. This promise was harder. They don't deserve your protection, I said. It's not about what they deserve. It's about who you become. Revenge would only diminish the man I know you can be. After a long pause, I nodded. I promise. Uncle Thomas passed away peacefully on a clear October morning, with me holding his hand and Mrs. Rodriguez saying quiet prayers in the corner of the room. He was just 56 years old. The funeral revealed aspects of Uncle Thomas's life I had never fully appreciated. Hundreds attended business associates, former employees, recipients of his philanthropic work, and people I'd never met who shared stories of his quiet generosity. A woman approached me after the service, introducing herself as Elaine Winters, director of a foundation for homeless youth. Your uncle funded our entire organization anonymously for 15 years, she told me. He never wanted recognition, just results. He said it was because he knew what it was like to be young and alone. The mayor spoke of Uncle Thomas's contributions to Seattle's infrastructure and economy. Former employees described his fairness and vision. Environmentalists praised his pioneering work in sustainable technologies. Through their stories, I glimpsed the true magnitude of the man who had taken me in, not just his wealth, which I'd always known was substantial, but his far-reaching impact on countless lives. After the funeral, Mr. Goldstein, Uncle Thomas's attorney, met with me briefly. Your uncle's estate is extensive and complex, he explained. There will be a formal reading of the will in the coming weeks. In the meantime, nothing changes regarding your living arrangements. Mrs. Rodriguez and Jackson will continue their duties, and any expenses should go through the usual channels. As I nodded, he added, There's one more thing. Your parents have already reached out through their lawyer. My stomach tightened. What do they want? To be notified of the will reading. As your uncle's only sibling, your father believes he has a claim to the estate. Mr. Goldstein's expression remained neutral, but his tone suggested this would not be a simple matter. The reality I'd been avoiding crashed in. My parents would try to get Uncle Thomas's money now that he was gone. The thought made me physically ill. Can they take it? I asked, dreading the answer. Mr. Goldstein allowed himself a small smile. Your uncle was extremely thorough in his estate planning. I wouldn't worry too much, but you should be prepared to see them at the reading. The thought of facing my parents, after 5 years of seeing the people who had abandoned me now showing up to claim wealth they'd done nothing to earn, filled me with a dread that eclipsed even my grief. 12 years passed in the blink of an eye. At 28, I barely resembled the abandoned teenager Uncle Thomas had taken in. MIT had shaped me into the engineer he'd always believed I could become. After graduating summa cum laude, I had worked at Bailey Technologies for 3 years before branching out to found Harper Sustainable Systems, a company focused on bringing affordable clean energy solutions to underserved communities. I lived in Uncle Thomas's mansion, my mansion now preserving much of it as it had been during his life, while updating other areas to accommodate my own style and needs. Mrs. Rodriguez, now 70, had refused to retire and still ran the household with loving efficiency, though she had assistants now to handle the heavier work. This house is my home too, she'd said when I suggested she might want to enjoy her golden years. And looking after you gives me purpose. Your uncle would want me to stay as long as I'm able. My company had recently made headlines for developing a solar panel system that cost 80% less than conventional models while delivering 30% more energy. The technology, built on principles Uncle Thomas and I had explored years earlier in his workshop, was being implemented in rural communities across America and in developing nations worldwide. Life was good, successful beyond what most 28-year-olds could imagine. Yet the shadows of the past occasionally still darkened even the brightest days. My parents had continued their sporadic attempts at contact over the years, especially after news coverage of my company's success began appearing in national media. I had established firm boundaries, agreeing only to rare, brief phone calls and declining all requests for financial assistance. Uncle Thomas's lessons about forgiveness had taken root, but forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or allowing further exploitation. On a rainy Tuesday in November, I was reviewing plans for a new manufacturing facility when my assistant, Mia, interrupted. "Mr. Bailey, there's a call from Mr. Goldstein's office. He says it's urgent." Arthur Goldstein had continued as my attorney after Uncle Thomas's death, becoming something of a mentor as well. His calls were never frivolous. "Harper," he said when I picked up, his voice grave, "it's time. The final provision of your uncle's will is now activating." I sat up straighter. "The sealed instructions? After all these years?" "Yes." He was very specific about the timing 15 years after his death, to the day. "I've scheduled the reading for Friday at 10 in my office." "And Harper," he paused, "your parents have been notified as stipulated in his instructions." My stomach tightened, just as it had 15 years earlier. "They'll come for the money, almost certainly. But remember what I told you back then, your uncle was extremely thorough." After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring out at the rain-lashed sound. For 15 years, I had known this day would come. Uncle Thomas had structured his will in stages, with the bulk of his estate held in trust with me as beneficiary, but not fully transferred until this final provision was satisfied. Mr. Goldstein had never been permitted to tell me what that provision contained, only that it was your uncle's last and most important lesson. That evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "It's been too long, son." My father's message was brief. "Harper, we've heard about the final will reading. It's time this family came together again. Your mother and I have had a difficult 15 years, but we've changed. We're so proud of the man you've become and the success you've achieved. Looking forward to reconnecting on Friday. Dad." No apology for abandonment. No acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. Just a transparent attempt to position themselves for whatever money might be coming. The next day brought a text from my mother, equally self-serving, claiming she'd always known I would be successful and that she prayed for me every day. Friday arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed carefully in one of Uncle Thomas's favorite suits that I'd had tailored to fit me a subtle connection to him on this important day. Mrs. Rodriguez straightened my tie. "Your uncle would be so proud of the man you've become," she said. "Not because of your success, but because of your character." "I hope so," I replied. "Sometimes I wonder if I've lived up to his expectations." She patted my cheek. "He never had expectations for you, Harper. Only hopes, and you've exceeded every one." Mr. Goldstein's office occupied the top floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise, with views of the city skyline and harbor beyond. As my car pulled up to the building, I spotted a couple standing by the entrance, a man with gray-streaked hair and a woman with obvious cosmetic surgery, trying too hard to look younger than her years. Even after 15 years, I recognized them immediately. My parents. They had aged, of course. My father had developed a paunch and lost most of his hair. My mother's face looked artificially tight, her lips too full, her skin stretched in a way that spoke of multiple procedures. Both were dressed in clothes that seemed new but somehow ill-fitting, as if they'd rushed to purchase outfits that would make them appear more affluent than they were. As I approached, my mother's face lit up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Harper, my baby boy, all grown up." She moved as if to hug me, but I stepped back slightly, extending my hand instead. "Diane, Richard, it's been a long time." The formality clearly disappointed them, but they recovered quickly. "Son, you look great," my father said, shaking my hand with excessive enthusiasm, spitting image of Thomas in his prime. "We've followed your career, you know. So proud." "Let's head upstairs," I said, unwilling to engage in false pleasantries. "Mr. Goldstein is waiting." In the elevator, my mother chatted nervously about their life in Arizona, how they'd struggled but persevered. how they'd always meant to reconnect but thought I needed space. My father nodded along, occasionally adding details about business ventures that had almost succeeded and opportunities that had somehow slipped through his fingers. I said little, studying these strangers who shared my DNA but felt nothing like family. They were thinner than I remembered, with the weathered look of people who had lived hard lives. Despite their attempts to appear prosperous, I noticed the scuffed edges of my father's shoes, the small tear in the seam of my mother's purse that had been inexpertly mended. Mr. Goldstein greeted us in the conference room, professional as always. "Please have a seat. We're still waiting for the other attendees." "Other attendees?" my father asked, frowning. I thought this was a family matter. Before Mr. Goldstein could respond, the door opened again. Mrs. Rodriguez entered, followed by Jackson, now in his 40s but still carrying himself with the same efficient dignity. Behind them came several people I recognized from Uncle Thomas's philanthropic work, directors of foundations he had supported, leaders of community organizations he had believed in. My parents exchanged confused glances as everyone settled around the large conference table. "Now that everyone is here," Mr. Goldstein began, "we can proceed with the final provision of Thomas Bailey's last will and testament, to be executed precisely 15 years after his death as he instructed." He opened an envelope sealed with wax and withdrew several documents. "Before I read the specific provisions, I should note for the record that the bulk of Thomas Bailey's estate has been managed in trust by Harper Bailey for the past 15 years, with remarkable success. The initial value of approximately $75 million has grown to nearly $95 million under Harper's stewardship." My parents' eyes widened at the figure, and my father leaned forward slightly. "I will now read Thomas Bailey's final instructions, written in his own hand and sealed until this day." Mr. Goldstein cleared his throat and began to read. "If these words are being read, 15 years have passed since my death, and Harper has had time to establish himself as the man I always knew he could become. To those gathered today, I express my gratitude for your patience in honoring my wishes. First, to Mrs. Elena Rodriguez, whose loyalty and care made my house a home, I leave an additional sum of $2 million beyond the annual pension already established, with my eternal gratitude for extending that same care to Harper. To Jackson Pierce, whose efficiency and discretion made my work possible, I leave $1 million and my collection of rare watches, which he always admired, but never mentioned. To each of the charitable organizations represented here today, I leave $5 million to continue the work we began together, with the stipulation that Harper remain involved as an advisor to ensure the funds are used as intended." Mr. Goldstein paused, then continued, "And now to the matter of family. To Richard and Diane Bailey, who abandoned their son Harper when he needed them most, I leave exactly $13 for each year of Harper's life before they left him." The room fell silent. My mother's artificially enhanced lips parted in shock. My father's face flushed dark red. "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "I'm Thomas's only brother. Blood family." Mr. Goldstein raised a hand. "Please allow me to finish reading." He continued, "This decision is not made out of malice, but out of recognition of the choices Richard and Diane made. They chose to walk away from their responsibilities as parents. They chose to contact Harper only when they wanted money. They chose to abdicate the most important job any person can have, raising their child with love and stability. I have documented every letter, email, and phone call they sent over the years, all asking for money, never expressing genuine remorse or concern for Harper's well-being. This evidence has been preserved should they choose to contest this will, though I strongly advise against such action, as it would only reveal the extent of their neglect and self-interest." My mother was silently crying now, black mascara tracking down her cheeks. My father looked like he might explode. "To Harper James Bailey, I leave the remainder of my estate, all properties, business interests, and investments, not because he is my nephew by blood, but because he became the son of my heart, because he faced abandonment with courage, adversity with determination, and success with humility. Harper, if you're hearing these words, know that my greatest joy was watching you grow into a man of integrity and purpose. The legacy I leave you is not measured in dollars, but in the potential to continue making a difference in the world. Use these resources wisely, as I believe you will. And if Richard and Diane are present, I have one final message. You walked away from the greatest treasure you ever had. No amount of money could ever equal the value of the remarkable young man you left behind. Perhaps this realization will be worth more than any inheritance I could have left you. Mr. Goldstein set down the document. There is video testimony supporting these decisions, recorded by Mr. Bailey before his death, and held in escrow until today, should anyone wish to contest the will. My father stood abruptly. This is a travesty. We'll fight this. Thomas was obviously not in his right mind. Mr. Goldstein remained calm. That would be inadvisable, Mr. Bailey. The video testimony is quite clear, and Thomas underwent psychological evaluation before recording it specifically to prevent such challenges. Additionally, contesting the will would trigger the release of all correspondence between you and your son over the past 20 years, which would not reflect favorably on your case. My mother turned to me, her face a mask of calculated desperation. Harper, sweetie, you know we always loved you. We had problems, yes, but we're still your parents. Surely you won't let this stand. We're family. For a moment, I said nothing, looking at these two people who had walked out of my life with nothing but a note and $50, who had reached out only when they wanted something, who had shown up today not to reconnect with their son, but to claim money they hadn't earned. Uncle Thomas's words about forgiveness echoed in my mind. This moment wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about boundaries and truth. I don't hate you, I said finally, my voice steady. I stopped hating you years ago. It took too much energy that I needed for other things. They both looked hopeful at this. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It doesn't mean giving you money because we share DNA. It means I can sit here today, look you both in the eye, and feel something other than rage or bitterness. I stood up, buttoning my jacket, a gesture Uncle Thomas always made when concluding important business. I'll honor Uncle Thomas's will exactly as written. You'll receive your $13. But I'll also offer you something he didn't specify, a chance at an actual relationship, if you want it. Not based on money or what I can give you, but based on genuine connection. My number hasn't changed in 15 years. If you're interested in knowing your son, not your meal ticket, you can call me. My father's face twisted with anger. You ungrateful. Richard, my mother interrupted, putting a hand on his arm. She looked at me with what seemed like genuine regret for perhaps the first time. We made a mistake, Harper. A terrible mistake. Yes, you did, I agreed. But mistakes don't have to be the end of the story unless you choose to keep repeating them. They left soon after, my father storming out while my mother lingered a moment, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Perhaps a realization of all she had thrown away for the empty promise of an easier life. After the others had departed with their respective bequests, only Mrs. Rodriguez, Jackson, and Mr. Goldstein remained. Your uncle would have been proud, Mr. Goldstein said. You honored his wishes while still leaving the door open for reconciliation. That takes strength. Uncle Thomas taught me that true strength isn't about power over others, I replied. It's about standing firm in your own values while still remaining open to possibility. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed my hand. He is proud, wherever he is. I feel it. That evening, back at the mansion, my home, I sat in Uncle Thomas's study, now mine, looking out at the sound as the sun set. On the desk sat a letter I'd never shown anyone, delivered by Mr. Goldstein on the day after Uncle Thomas's funeral. My uncle's final words to me alone. Harper, by the time you read this, I will be gone. But if I've done my job right, you won't be alone. You'll be surrounded by people who value you for who you are, not what you have. When I took you in, I thought I was rescuing you. The truth is, you rescued me from a life of wealth without meaning, success without connection. You brought purpose to my final years that no business achievement ever could. The path ahead won't always be easy. Your parents may reappear when the final provisions of my will are executed. Remember that their choices reflect their own brokenness, not your worth. Forgiveness doesn't require you to be a doormat, it just frees you from carrying the weight of their failures. Build something meaningful, Harper, not just with money or technology, but with your life. Create connections that matter. Solve problems that help people. Find the joy I didn't discover until it was almost too late. I may not be your father by blood, but in every way that matters, you are my son, and I couldn't be prouder of the man you are becoming. With love and faith in your future, Uncle Thomas. 15 years after receiving those words, I could finally say I'd honored them. The company I'd built focused on solving real problems for people without access to clean energy. The foundation I'd established in Uncle Thomas's name provided scholarships for teenagers facing challenges similar to mine. And though the wound of abandonment had left a scar, it no longer defined me. My phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be from Zoe, who had remained my closest friend and recently become something more. Instead, it was from my mother. Harper, your father is too proud to admit it, but we were wrong. Not just today, but 15 years ago. I don't expect forgiveness or money. But if your offer of a relationship was sincere, I'd like to try, one step at a time. Mom. I set the phone down, not ready to respond yet. Uncle Thomas had taught me that some decisions shouldn't be rushed. Whatever I decided about my parents, it would be from a position of strength, not need. The abandoned boy was gone, replaced by a man who understood that true family isn't always defined by blood, but by choice, commitment, and love. Looking out at the darkening sky, I whispered, "Thank you, Uncle Thomas," knowing that his greatest gift hadn't been the wealth or opportunities, but the example he'd set of integrity, purpose, and the courage to choose the right path, even when it wasn't the easiest one. What would you do if you were in my situation? Would you give your parents another chance after such betrayal? Or would you keep your distance despite forgiving them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your own path. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I hope this story helps you appreciate the people who've stood by you when others walked away.